All right, folks, welcome back to this episode of the Customer Discovercast. I am your host, Ethan Halfide, and I'm here with Jim Semick, co-founder of ProductPlan, author of the Essentialist Product Manager. Welcome, Jim.
Thanks, Ethan. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here today.
Yeah, this is an honor, man. I'm a huge fan of your business product plan, as many product managers are. How about you tell the audience members a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is in product management. I've been doing new product development and releasing products and launching products for about the last 20 years. I got my start with a software startup in Santa Barbara, California, that initially failed. And I can go into some of the reasons why that failed and why the customer discovery process is so essential for product managers to create successful products. I later went on and helped launch and actually wrote the product requirements for GoToMeeting, which was one of the leading online meeting software platforms. I did the same thing for GoToMyPC and GoToWebinar, and then later went on to be part of the founding team at a company called AppFolio, which is a B2B SaaS company and is currently now publicly traded. So really proud of the products that we launched there that were very successful in the market. And then about 8 years ago, I set out to launch my own company. I had seen how the process of building and launching products and decided I wanted to do it for myself. And so I got together with my co-founder, Greg, and we launched ProductPlan, which is product roadmap software for product managers. And today we're used by thousands of product teams all over the world, including Spotify, Microsoft, and others to build and launch their own products.
That's incredible. Wow. Yeah, very impressive. And I kind of want to talk on that initial failure. What happened there? Why did you guys fail?
Yeah. Many reasons. And in fact, that company had spent about $10 million building a product and putting that product out for free use by their customers. And then came the day that they were going to flip the switch to go live, and the customers were expected to start paying for it. So they flipped
Hmm.
the switch and hardly anyone paid.
Wow.
And we said, wow, we have a big disconnect here. We didn't really understand why customers would buy, whether we had customers ready to buy when we were ready to launch. And we really, truly didn't understand the customer problem that we were solving. And had we done customer development, have we done customer discovery, have we really done some in-depth interviews with prospects, we would have avoided that failure.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so luckily the company had enough money in the bank left so that we pivoted to a second product. And I was brought in to do customer discovery on that second product and started interviewing customers about what they would like about the product, what wouldn't they like about the product, what features they expected, what problems it solved for them. And through that, we came up with GoToMyPC, and that product became a market leader and
Wow.
one of the earliest SaaS products. And we in large part the success was due to us thoroughly understanding the problem that we were solving before we built the product, rather than the other way around, which is what most entrepreneurs do. They have an idea, they love the idea, they talk to a few people about it who are very excited about the idea, and then they start building. And sometimes that works out really well. Sometimes they hit the nail on the head and it just, the product's a success, the company's success, but it's so much riskier. It's so much riskier to do it that way. And when you can sell the product first before you start building it, that to me is one of the keys of success.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the last point that you touched on, I have many things to respond to in your previous message, but what are your thoughts on charging in the discovery phase before you even have a product? The purest form of validation is being able to charge for something that doesn't exist quite yet. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a fan of that. I think that first of all, you want to charge when there's enough value. So
Mm,
that's the key. That's the key point. It doesn't need to be a ton of value. You don't need to solve every customer problem, but at the point where you're delivering some kind of value to the customer, you're solving some maybe fractional problem that they have, then it's going to be legitimate to charge for it. And this is even when you're in the alpha stage or beta stage. I talk with entrepreneurs about using this concierge MVP concept,
Hmm.
which
Yep.
is you're building the basics of a product, and you haven't built the whole product yet, but to the customer, it look a whole product. And so, it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz. Don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain, right? You actually have something there, and then a lot of heavy lifting is done behind the scenes. And the customers are still getting value for that. And you should be charging for it, even if it's not perfect, even if you can't roll it out to the masses, even if the UI is not great. And I've always been a big believer that that your earliest customers, these early adopters, are
Hmm.
very forgiving of you if you are delivering some kind of value for them.
I
And
agree.
so that's why it doesn't need to be perfect.
Isn't that's so exciting because it's almost like it's a common misconception to say I need to polish this product before I ever charge for it. But if you look at the Crossing the Chasm framework, and is it Godfrey Moore, and of course Steve Blank, who is an absolute legend. When I follow those frameworks and I do a little bit of research, I've purchased insight reports on tech early adopters and innovators. You start to see that it's actually an adverse reaction to a too much polished product. If you think about it, they love the rough cuts. They love having to provide feedback and help mold some sort of new innovation. So it's kind of rest assured, get that thing out there, ship. They say great CEOs ship. So that's
Yeah,
great that you touched
exactly.
on that.
Yeah, and Steve Blank talks about these early evangelists. These are
Hmm.
these are your early adopters who are willing to take a chance on you. And the reason that they're willing to take a chance on you is that they have a problem that they're trying to solve. They've tried to solve it themselves, but it's not working out very well. So they know they have a problem and they're trying to solve that problem. And then they have the budget to buy. And these are the best early customers for you to find because they can be, while they might be a little bit visionary and a little bit ahead of their time, they're the customers who will be forgiving of you when there are bugs in software.
Absolutely. Let's talk about that. So with Product Plan, talk about the first, maybe you had the idea and within 30 days you set up your first idea validation experiment. How did you go about that first, period of research?
Yeah, yeah. Well, my co-founder and I had gotten together. We were talking about a variety of business ideas. We had actually validated some other products, and we at one point were very close to launching software for the healthcare industry. And then we looked at that and said, is this really the kind of business that we want? It would have required venture capital. And my co-founder and I said initially that we do not want to take outside capital, that we're going to
Hmm.
self-fund it. So that was a
Really?
key decision that we made, and one that we were both aligned on, which is another key point
Right.
for entrepreneurs out there to be very aligned with their co-founders. But we were validating a variety of ideas, and for one reason or another, the ideas just weren't quite the right fit for what we wanted. And then I started talking with a couple of product manager friends of mine, and started just bouncing some ideas off of them. And then that led into a full on market validation process where we would contact product managers and then ask them what their day was like. How were they evaluated? What were the challenges in their day? And product roadmaps really bubbled up to the top as one of the key challenges that they had. And so
Hmm.
we started going down fairly early on down that path, asking about product roadmaps, how they're using product roadmaps, the deficiencies that they had, what happens when a product roadmap is not done well, what are the repercussions for that, and started going down that path. And then about I would say 20 to 30 interviews in, we decided to set up a landing page.
Hmm.
And we took all the learnings that we had from our interviews and put together, and I did this in just a couple of hours, put together a fake website. And we drove traffic to that website based on the keywords that we thought people would be looking for. We had the value proposition on the web page that we were learning that we thought was the right value proposition, but we're not 100% sure. And we put in a form where people could put in their email address for access to a free preview for a product that didn't yet exist. And
Wow.
then those people became the next round of market validation interviews, because we said, we would contact them and said, hey, we're in the process of developing this software and would really love your insight into helping make this software right for you. And many of those people eventually became our first customers. So through that process, we validated not only the MVP, but we validated the way that we talk about the product, the value proposition. We validated the acquisition model, because we had a hypothesis early on that we would that there were people looking on Google for product roadmap software, and as one of the very first to market, it was still a very early stage space. So we didn't really have a lot of competitors to look at to help us understand what we needed to do. So there weren't necessarily patterns that that we could follow. So through that process of launching the landing page and interviewing these customers for weeks after, and some of these interviews, most of them were very in-depth, 45 minutes, hour-long interviews, really truly understanding if this is something that they would buy.
Absolutely.
So that process was really instrumental to us. And then we learned through through purchasing ads on LinkedIn and Google, we started to get a feel for what the acquisition was. We got a feel for the acquisition cost. We can make guesses on conversion rates. And so we built a business case around that and said, if we can get so many people into the top of the funnel, we're going to wind up with a certain number of customers at the end. And then we made, our best guesses as to what the lifetime value was and so on. And that led us to where we are today.
Yeah. Wow. So fun fact, I did not know that ProductPlan is entirely bootstrapped still to this day, or have you guys since taken funding?
No, we're entirely bootstrapped.
Wow.
And
that's incredible.
and which is, I'm very proud of it. When you bootstrap though, and this was a conscious decision that we made early on, and we've continued with that decision to this day. There are many downsides to it.
I was
as you
going
can
to
imagine.
what went into that decision?
Yeah. So, well, my co-founder and I are more mature. We've had prior successes. So we had capital that we could use. We could self-fund it. The other thing that was more important was we wanted autonomy. We wanted the ability to control our own destiny. And when you bring in outside investors, you're somewhat beholden to what their needs are. And it also changes the equation. And, rather than, if your goal as a bootstrap company is to build $100 million business, well, if you bring in outside investors, now the bar has changed. The bar is higher. It's, $500 million or it's $1 billion. And the expectations are very different. And so we wanted to build a company that we enjoyed working in, with people that we enjoy working with. And we wanted to control our own destiny. And that, and that works really well. The downside though, is that you move a lot slower. You also make compromises. When it came time for us to hire our first developer, for example, we needed to be very creative about how we paid that developer. So we weren't able to just hire the top talent or hire some team and have them simply build the product. It was very scrappy, with my partner Greg and I doing a lot of the work, doing our own design until we could hire a full-time designer. And of course, doing our own QA for years. And for sales as well, right? So I had to learn how to sell software, and that skill wasn't necessarily in my wheelhouse. But
what was the biggest challenge there?
Behind selling or in general? Yeah,
I would say more specifically in selling. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had built a product-led growth engine in the beginning. So we had a try-buy process where we didn't need to get involved. So someone could actually find us, sign up for a free trial, use the software, be guided in how to use the software, get automated emails, and actually purchase the software without interacting with a human being. And that works really well if you're buying 1, 2, 3, 4 licenses, right? Self-service works really well, especially in our industry. Product managers, they like self-service. They want to do it themselves. They want to figure it out themselves. But as our product became more mature and bigger enterprises started to become interested in our solution, that model doesn't necessarily work.
Mm.
And so if we're talking to, a major software company, for example, you're not simply selling to one product manager. You're selling to the VP of product. You're
Right.
selling to the IT department that needs to get involved. You're selling to the procurement department who needs to get involved. And then the sale becomes much more complicated, and an online acquisition model doesn't necessarily work in that case. It may work very well for that one person testing the software, and then they talk and say, hey, we really like this software, let's figure out how to purchase more. But as a sales process, when you're selling dozens or 100 licenses, you need to have a more sophisticated selling process. And that's what I needed to learn. That was the challenging part, in understanding for our industry what's the sales cycle. And then you have someone like me who's not necessarily a sales expert, coming in trying to figure out that process. And now today we have an amazing sales team. We have we call them product specialists. It's really consultative selling. We have sales management, sales leadership. We have a fantastic customer success team that works with existing customers and helps them get value out of the product, and they eventually buy more. So we have that engine running. But in the early days, we're trying to figure it out, how long the sales cycle is, what is the right pricing for an enterprise sale? Is it less? Is it more? What are all those models?
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong. It was figuring that out is what I enjoy the most. It's figuring out the puzzle.
Right. I was going to ask about that. The puzzle changes for you as you went from a more kind of B2C, right? Because you were starting with individual product managers at probably smaller organizations. And then you went to, I believe you mentioned Spotify on that list as well. Did you say Uber as well? So these bigger companies, what changed about your product when you went from that smaller startup product manager to the more enterprise oriented sales?
Yeah, yeah. The problem that you're solving is different. When in the beginning, we were solving the product roadmap software problem. They need to be able to quickly build and communicate their product strategy, usually to stakeholders such as their boss, and to the executive team. So they needed something that was visually pleasing, something that they could build very quickly, and that works great. We were solving a problem, and we were getting paid to solve that problem. But if you imagine a larger software company that has dozens or 100 product managers, it's very complicated. You have management layers in there, and the problem that a VP of product has for that organization is very different than the product manager. So now we need to start solving the problem for that VP as well. And their problem is that all of my product managers are doing it differently, right? And they need to roll up all of this information from all of these different product managers, getting their information from Google Docs, from spreadsheets, from maybe a software system, right? And they're pulling their hair out because there's no standardization. There's no consistent way to evaluate opportunities. There's no consistent way to present the information to their executives. So we started solving that problem. So we came out with our portfolio view, a way of rolling up different roadmaps. We came out with ways of standardizing the information within larger organizations. We came up with, for example, a tagging system where they can tag information. And then you also need, if you're a part of a larger organization, a way of managing those tags, a way of standardizing those tags, a way of merging tags together. So those are some of the more difficult challenges that an enterprise has that an individual product manager doesn't have. And that continues today. So, as you move into larger enterprises, we need to make sure to integrate with SAML authentication systems, to make sure that we're integrating well within their IT framework. We are now ISO certified because that was something that our customers, the larger organizations, need. They want to make sure that you're, safe and secure with their data. So that's the evolution of it over time, is that you start to really focus on these enterprise level features and things to support that sales process.
Right. And it seems like, in the sales process, you probably learned a lot about how to better structure your product to sell it, right? So it was probably a good thing
Yeah.
for you to be in charge of the sales efforts, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I encourage, entrepreneurs and founders that don't outsource this stuff. Learn it yourself, and especially at the very early stages, because hearing it directly from customers and really trying to understand it and thinking about it and talking about it with your co-founder and making sure that you're all hearing the same thing, there is no better way to learn. So getting in there in the weeds, and even if you hire a consultant to help you with your customer discovery process, be in the room. Listen to the recordings if you record, but like participate in that, and don't expect that you're going to get some sort of a magic report that's going to give you the answers.
It
And
sounds so
I don't know if you
intuitive.
would,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, yeah, and I'm sure you would say the same thing to your clients. Be in
Absolutely.
the room, learn.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, okay. So now shifting focus, you made a really good point. So in your book, this Essentialist Product Manager, the Essentialist
Mhm.
Product Manager, my favorite part was when you say create space to think. Instead of just putting out fires all the time and you're running around and you're, moving from one problem to the next, think about why you're actually doing what you're doing. Basically, that brings me to the point of a root cause analysis. When you're talking about solving a problem for a customer and you're trying to decide what to build next, how to evolve your product, it always stems from a place of what is the product we're trying to solve for the end consumer? Who's going to be buying this and what problems do they have? How do we
Mhm.
better serve those issues? Talk about that a little bit, stemming from kind of the philosophies within your book. Talk about how people can do that a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned the space piece. I think that
Mhm.
is really important for product managers and entrepreneurs. That they're when you're starting a company, there are 1,000 things that you can be doing, right? And you
Mhm.
could be pulling your hair out. You could be working 7 days a week, and sometimes that's appropriate. But you need to allow the space for the learning to happen. You need to allow the space for the creative thinking to solve the problems. And
Right.
you can get that a number of different ways. I found that stepping out of my day-to-day and going to a conference, for example, is a fantastic way to shift my perspective and create that space so I can look at problems from a different angle. So for those that are considering starting a business, I find that conferences are a great way to fast track your information, fast track your
Mhm.
learning, and also to give you the space just to be thinking about the things that you're hearing. So I think that's really important for me now. My space is I block time out on my calendar, and I spend time writing and thinking, and I think that is incredibly important for entrepreneurs too.
Mm. Do you
Then
have a certain recommendation for that in terms of like how to structure your day to maximize space?
well, in a startup, in an early stage startup, it is, like I said, very possible to get your calendar filled up by
Mhm.
other people and what their agendas are. And in a startup, you don't really know what the most important thing is. And so that's, coming to your point about, root cause, finding out what the purpose is and coming up with a hypothesis of what you want to build, and then focusing on that and excluding everything else is so important.
Right.
It's very
Yeah.
easy to get caught up in, ooh, we have to have a social media strategy. And, oh, and now we need to spend all of our time on the road, and maybe not during a pandemic, but it's very easy to go in 100 different directions with a startup. And by doing that, you're running the risk of making tiny, tiny bits of progress in all of these areas and not moving forward on the most important thing, which
Right.
is getting your product out the door, which is making your first sale, collecting that very first check or that very first credit card payment, right? That is the goal, and that for us was the driver. For me, um, the goal was to get someone to give me their credit card.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
What does it take to get that? And you exclude pretty much everything else at that point. Of course, it includes building a great product and having a great customer experience. But if we could, like, we even to this day, there are features that I would love to have in the product that we talked about very early on that are still not there. And that's because we're focusing on the most important things.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
it's very
Yeah.
easy to be scattered and go down a lot of different directions.
Absolutely. Yeah. And now with technology, we can be so connected to anything that we can, any kind of wormhole that we want to connect down to. But one thing you brought up as well, the difference
Mhm.
between an assumption and a hypothesis, and that's something people don't know. A lot of people, use the terms interchangeably. And to really simplify it for the audience as well, and I would love for you to go in depth with this. I'll kind of, start at the 10,000 foot high, big picture level, and then you can dive deeper. But the difference between an assumption and a hypothesis is that an assumption, we can either accept the risk or we can convert it into a falsifiable hypothesis, just like with the scientific method. Talk about your philosophy on that.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big believer in not spending a lot of time trying to figure out exactly what to build.
Mhm.
I would much rather say, I think it's this, write it down, and then begin to test it.
Mm,
And I use the framework that you use, the method that you use to write it down is almost irrelevant. I like to use the business model canvas as a way of kind of sparking my thinking, because the business model canvas, for those that aren't familiar, it's a way of thinking through the 9 areas of a business model. And one of them is the product and the value proposition. And many entrepreneurs get stuck in that area. They're very product focused. But of course, a business model is so much more than that. It's the acquisition model, it's the way that you generate revenue, it's your cost structure, it's the customer segment that you're targeting. And so you want to have a hypothesis for every one of those areas and then begin to test it. And testing it can be speaking with 5 people in a particular customer segment to see, test the waters. Does this customer segment have the problem that I think they have? And so that it's an iterative process. And I see product teams that spin their wheels trying to figure out exactly the right thing to build, and they'll spend weeks debating. What do we do this? Do we do that? Well, I would advocate spend an hour, write it down what you think. And you know what? If you're having a big debate and you don't know whether it's, if you're going to charge $69 or $169, just pick one. It
mhm.
doesn't matter
Yep.
because it'll change anyway. It's probably wrong. There's something about your business model that is wrong. And so if you go into it with that assumption, it takes a lot of the load off. You get something out there, you start talking with customers about it. You're never committed until you actually sell to them, and then begin to test, right? And if you find hesitation at $169, you move down. So,
That's right.
so that's the iterative process, and that's my philosophy about validation. That, you know, start with one person, start with a basic hypothesis. It can iterate along the way. By the time you're done with 20 interviews, hopefully it looks dramatically different than it did during your first interview, because otherwise you're not learning.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, the more that I listen to you speak, and you're biased towards action and making sure you get something out there, go test it, come back, because you can't. Only assumptions lie within the business. Facts are without of it. And if you go out there, you test it, you come back with facts, and then you can decide on what to build. I see why you wrote your book. I want you to kind of talk more about what was the motivation behind the Essentialist Product Manager.
Yeah. Yeah, most of the books that I've written were very product management focused. So I've written a book on product roadmaps. I've written a book on finding product market fit. It's very, very tactical. And as a founder and with a busy personal life, I have teenage sons. life is busy and complicated. So I was looking for a way to get more done in a day, trying to fit it
Mm,
all in. And I came across this concept of essentialism. There's a book by Greg McKeown called Essentialism, and that really inspired me because it is a lot of what product managers do. They, they're scattered. They're putting out fires all day long. They are the expert, right? And they get called into all these meetings, and so I felt that this concept really applies to product managers, because the concept in a nutshell is do less, but do it better. Instead of 100 different things and scattering our energy in 100 different directions, let's pick the top 2, 3, or 4 things that are most important to us and exclude everything else.
mm,
And by doing that, you can make greater progress and more significant progress on your products. You can make more significant progress in your day too. You can get to the end of your day and feel like you accomplished something, rather than getting to the end and saying, I didn't finish anything.
mhm.
So the essentialist concept and the book that I wrote for product managers is about how to say no. How do you say no to all of the competing ideas that are coming your way from all of your executives and your customers? How do you prioritize the 100 things that you're supposed to be prioritizing? How do you not fill up your entire day full of meetings? How do you allow space in your day for the creative, strategic thinking that everyone says that they want to do, but no one does because there's never time for strategic thinking? So that's what the book is about, and so I'm merging together these concepts of essentialism in our personal life and product management in our professional life,
Mhm.
and blending them together, and it really resonates with product managers.
Yeah, yeah. It almost seems like the Paretos principle for product managers, you know?
It is, yeah, it is
Yeah.
definitely the 80-20 rule.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I found that consistently in validating with these customers as well, right? You're going to get most of your learning from a handful of customers, and um, and you don't want to be building a product for the 100%, especially at the beginning. There's no way that you can build a product for the entire market. So what you want to do is focus on the 20% of the customers who have the biggest problem and build it for them. And then you can begin to expand over time as you have the resources to do that. But building a niche product at the very beginning for a limited customer set is, in my opinion, absolutely the way to success.
Absolutely. Jim, beautifully said. Beautifully said. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, this has been fun.
Absolutely. For those that are listening, I want them to be able to get in touch with you. I want them to be able to download your book. It's completely free, and access Product Plan for our product professionals out there. But for any other additional forms of communication, let the audience know how they can reach you.
Yeah, absolutely. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm Jim Semick. It's Semick. And I publish regularly on LinkedIn. I also publish at the Product Plan blog, which is productplan.com/blog. For those that are product managers and in the product world, you can download a 14-day trial of our software at productplan.com. And then the Essentialist Product Manager book you can find under our resources section at Product Plan, and you can sign up for a free copy there.
Absolutely. Jim, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, Ethan, thank you very much.
No problem.